Keep it short and sweet and simple and yeah. Because if you're who has exams here? Who has? Right, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Today we are going to be talking about stress and anxiety. A very uplifting topic. So we'll look at a very quick. We don't want to spend a lot of time discussing every aspect of it. We want to focus more on the spiritual side. But we will follow it as if it's when you go to the doctor and you're told you have some sort of. We'll go through the same kind of process. We'll define it. We'll define what is stress and what is anxiety and what is depression, because people use all these words interchangeably, but there is a difference. And then what are the sources of stress? And then the symptoms, like what do you look like when you're a person who has a lot of stress and anxiety? Then we look at the harms, like what does that cause in your life? And finally the cure. What do we need to do to overcome? All right. So let's start with the definition. What is the difference between stress and anxiety? What is the difference between stress, anxiety, and depression?
I think stress is a normal human reaction to something that makes you uncomfortable, or that kind of start your fight or flight.
Yeah.
That's stress.
Anxiety?
Anxiety is someone who dwells a little bit on it, and it becomes not an overreaction, but could be an overreaction of that feeling, and you're. It could hinder them from accomplishing their task.
That's you already went into depression.
No, this is still anxiety.
Or is this like severe anxiety? So what is the difference between anxiety and depression?
Depression is dwelling on it to the point that you come to the realization, which is not true, that there is no hope. And then this is where you let go. There's those 5 steps of like.
Yeah. They measure different things. They ask you a question and they basically know if you're stressed, anxious, or depressed. So just maybe to reword it a little bit, stress is usually a reaction to a stressor. So an external factor that causes you to feel stress. Example, you have an exam and you're stressed. You just did a blood test and you're stressed of the results of the blood test. One of your family members is sick and going into surgery and you're stressed. All of these are stress factors because something is happening externally that causes stress.
Is there a difference between stress and worry?
So, worry causes stress, and stress causes worry. They feed each other. So if you're too worried all the time, then you would be stressed all the time.
Or are they the same?
They're not the same. Stress is your bodily expression of worry. Like worry is your mental state, and stress is like your actual body responding to that mental state. You feel butterflies in your stomach, your hands are sweaty or cold. This is all like stress, like showing itself physically. So, anything else from the medical side? Am I for stress?
I mean, not really, just to say that it's supposed to be helpful. Like stress is supposed to help you deal with
Yes.
a challenge or an obstacle.
Correct. So the reason we have stress is because, back in the day when an animal showed up, you felt stressed because you had to run away, right? So your body's pumping blood, fight or flight, basically. This is what we call it, fight or flight. So stress in this case is only in response to a stressor, and that's it. You know, usually stress stops when, not chronic stress, but stress usually stops when the stressor is finished. Like when you finish the exam, when you get the blood test and you're fine, when the surgery goes okay, then you're khalas, yeah, the stressor is gone, you go back to a normal state. Anxiety is feeling stress even if there are no stressors. So anxiety is, you are constantly feeling worried or stressed about something, even if there's no reason for you to be stressed or anxious. Baba Shnuda can be I listened to like a thing about Baba Shnuda. He says a very good example. He says an example of that is like a child. Imagine a child, a baby, who looks up and all of a sudden he doesn't see his mom or his dad. He panics and starts crying, but nothing happened to the baby. Like there's nothing, like no one is threatening the baby, but the baby, just the fact that the parents are not around, gets anxious. So anxiety is like unexplainable, not necessarily unexplainable. We'll see what the reasons are.
Unjustified.
Mish unjustified either. There is a but it basically means that it's a constant state. Whether there's a stressor or not, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed. Depression is taking it back to the next level where you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is where I felt it, you're non-functional, it's affecting your daily life, you are in despair, complete despair all the time, you have no hope. No?
Not necessarily.
So what is it?
You can be depressed and still be functional. So there's like depression and anxiety. It's not like a spectrum from depression to anxiety. They're two separate things. So the problem is they often overlap. So it's hard to like separate them sometimes. But it's not like a continuum. That depression is where you.
But is depression more severe than anxiety?
Not necessarily. You could be totally non-functional from anxiety.
So what is the difference?
The thing is that a lot of people, when they get stuck in anxiety, they end up depressed. So that's why it feels like sometimes it's continuum, but it isn't necessarily. You can be depressed without ever being anxious.
So so what is the difference then? Where do you draw the line between depression and anxiety?
It's very difficult. But usually when you assess for anxiety, you're looking at, like you were saying before, worrying thoughts. People feel tense all the time, like their muscles might be tight, they're stressed, they're jumpy, they often don't sleep well. Yeah.
So these are all like we're going to talk about the symptoms as part of that, but yeah.
Depression is usually,
Fatigue.
I mean, this is
These are symptoms.
You have to answer for like 5 of the major
Yeah,
diseases.
yeah.
We're explaining that
But this is the problem, even the DSM is not
it's
like,
not, yeah.
they're not that, it's not that obvious as to where they are.
So somebody can actually be very depressed and not anxious at all.
Yeah, I think
And somebody can be very anxious and not come close to depression. They're a happy person, but they're always anxious.
And depending on the symptoms you have when you're depressed, you may still be able to function to some extent.
I think it's just like what varies between depression and anxiety is that, like, maybe the result is the same for both of them. You're not functional, but the feelings inside of you are very different. With anxiety, it's like you panic very easily and you're like, you can't handle things. And with depression, you're just like, you're not willing or why.
You have no interest. You have no lack of interest, despair.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like what John was saying, like, you know, in anxiety, there's still like hope, like you're still like in a fighting mode. In depression, it's like, you started the giving up slope of like, whatever.
But that seems like a worse state than anxiety.
It is worse.
And Sarah's saying like not necessarily. But anyways, I don't want to get into like the semantics of it.
It's complicated because you're asking like how we use the words versus how we diagnose it. They're two different things.
So all in all is to say, maybe just to put things in perspective, just to keep it simple, stress is a good thing, like we said earlier. It's a response in order to accomplish something because there's an external stressor. Anxiety or depression, I don't know, like let's not confuse, but basically it means a consistent state of feeling stressed, consistently, okay? Whether there's a stressor or not. And then it becomes internalized. So let's move on. What do you think are the sources of, let's now just, I'm gonna call it for the sake of moving on, we'll call it anxiety, Okay, let's just call it anxiety, not the stress. Because stress is actually, again, like we said, it's not a bad thing. But let's call it anxiety where you have continuous stress. Okay? What are the sources of anxiety? What causes anxiety? And I want to split it into two, and you guys tell me which, like, suggest something and tell me which category. You have internally and externally. So internally, as in you, what can cause you anxiety? Thoughts about أي thought بيجيب anxiety. أي حاجة هتاكلي بيتزا النهارده
Friday stuff.
مفيش جبنة مالك vegetarian من غير جبنة.
I like pizza.
Fear of failure.
If you have an, yeah, okay. Sorry?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure.
Unknown future.
Unknown future. Yes.
Yeah, unknown future or unknown past. Like,
فقط
I'm
إذا
thinking about work, like you've done something and you're like, you're not sure if you did the right thing.
okay. So this is performance anxiety, like you're,
Performance anxiety.
or not performance anxiety. This is,
If you left the stove on.
لا ده كده Anything else internally?
Sin.
Huh?
Sin can cause anxiety.
Sin. Sin is actually a big one, and sin is internal and external. Like it takes both forms. What else? I'm just gonna name a few more, and then we'll take some of them. And,
Like you're saying surgery.
but that's an external thing. Yeah. So the external part, like you're going to a surgery or you're anxious.
I mean like surgery.
Pre-surgery, you're anxious in
Feeling
your
of
thoughts.
security.
Huh?
Security.
Yeah, insecure.
Security.
Security as in like,
It could be like insecurity as in like what people think of you or
yes,
what, you know.
yes. So what people think, you know, the perception of the people,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I was gonna say like a lot of the stuff that's like my health or my job or whatever, like this is all like under one big umbrella. It's called like fear of tomorrow or like you know saying,
Yes.
like the unknown, like the unknown future. Could be related to anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't see them being, part of it could be under the umbrella, part of it could be, like currently I have a problem financially, and I'm worried about it, like right now. It's not tomorrow, it's like right now.
Fear of death.
Fear of death, yeah? So
Well,
that causes you to be anxious about your health all the time?
depends. Some people are nasty. Depending on
Low self-esteem?
Phobias.
Phobias? So maybe just to name a few more كده, worry about the future is a big one. No trust in those around you. Constantly, and this is actually one of the biggest, and I'll say why later. Nowadays, this is one of the biggest causes of anxiety, is continuous comparison between yourself and others. And having an inferiority complex to other people around you. Previous bad experience, which I think goes a bit in line to what you were saying, like not necessarily like I don't remember what I did at work, but if you've had bad experiences in the past, it can dictate the way you think, so you feel anxious in the future about whatever happens. Some external things that can make you anxious: financial issues, family issues, performance issues, employment, sickness, disease. All of these are things that happen outside of you that can keep you consistently anxious. Huh?
things making me anxious. Like
طب تفيدها يا عم ليه الوجع ده؟
عشان تخلص بسرعة.
بيقول لك يعني
So you can feel stressed.
So, just to summarize that part, the sources of anxiety are so many, okay? There's so many sources of anxiety. And we'll talk later about some of the things that we need to cut down in order to cure some of those sources. So what are the symptoms of anxiety? What forms do they take physically? Someone is anxious, what do they physically look like?
Angry.
Angry,
Lack of sleep.
lack of sleep, heartbeat, racing, yes, heavy breathing.
حركة جدا.
ايوه انا قالت لي برضه انا بعملها all the time.
Misha was saying lose weight.
Impatience or agitation.
Yeah, agitation, impatience,
Lose weight, gain weight.
lose, gain weight, yeah. Sometimes feeling of anger, I already said anger. Isolation, sometimes if it gets so bad you isolate yourself from the people. Tense muscles, I think we mentioned it earlier. Gastro problems, fatigue, all of these issues are dictated by anxiety and depression. Now let's move to the core. This is the important part. What are the harms of anxiety? These are the symptoms physically. What are the spiritual harms of anxiety?
Sin. Sin.
So you think if you are anxious because of something that, either something internal or external, you have the tendency to sin more? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, you can do stuff like, I don't know, drink more.
Yeah, very good point. So one of the things we tend to do when we are always anxious is we go to the easy fix. And the easy fix is drinking, hanging out with friends. I'm not saying that hanging out with friends is a bad thing, but if that's what you do in order to overcome anxiety, then this becomes a problem.
I wouldn't call it easy fix. It doesn't fix it.
Yeah,
Touch.
it's self-medicating.
Yeah, and it gives you a short-term satisfaction to help you overcome that feeling of anxiety. Yeah, and it's almost like a distraction method.
Yeah.
It's a distraction. It's a way to distract yourself. What else? Netflix. Binging. Yeah, okay. So one of the biggest spiritual harms of anxiety is that anxiety is really a reflection of, like you said, the fact that you cannot trust in God. It's as simple as that. I remember reading a book once, I don't remember if it's the one by Saint Porphyrius or that. You're like, the holiest things are the simplest things. The holiest things are the simplest things. Holiness is not complicated. If you are anxious, it is simply because you lack trust in God. It's as simple as that. What else? What other harms of anxiety, spiritually?
Yeah, and he puts like a barrier between like you and God. It's like instead of putting God between you and the problem, you're putting the problem between you and God. So you start to like not see clearly and things start to lose perspective.
Mm-hmm. And how does that reflect on your personal spiritual life? Like when you put the problem between you and God, what does that mean? In your spiritual life? It means lack of prayer, like what is it?
When I put the problem between me and God. Well, oftentimes, yeah, like you could get feelings of like you feel like discouraged. You feel like God is very, very far.
Okay.
You feel like you can't think straight of like you can't find the path of solution. You just sometimes you actually like just spiritually freeze and you can't get yourself to like do anything.
So basically, you're too occupied or preoccupied with the problem that your focus is too narrow on the problem and you can't see anything beyond. Yes.
But you can also think that God is not like like God is not helping you. Like you can
You feel
be like,
abandoned.
yeah, you can be like, oh, but you're not helping me. Like, what are you doing?
So you feel God is like he's not there for you.
Yeah.
And this is actually a very good point, because when you're anxious and you're constantly focused on the problem, instead of looking at God, you're constantly focused on the problem, you tend to completely almost blind yourself from the fact that God is there. And that makes you feel like God is nowhere. He's not helping you.
Yeah.
He's not coming to rescue you. Why is he not, doing anything about this?
But at the same time, you're
And
not
makes
praying
you-
and you're not.
Oh, sorry.
Overall, I think you're not thinking straight. Like everything going through your mind fast, and everything you do is going to be wrong because you're not taking your time to think straight. So all the problems we said is connected to the same point where you're not thinking straight, so everything is going to go wrong.
So you're not thinking straight in the sense that you're not processing your thoughts.
Exactly.
And so you make
You're
decisions
not, you're
hastily.
not putting the problem in front of you like and thinking clearly about it. You just, you're anxious. You're going fast. You want to finish it fast. So all the problems like avoiding God and stuff like that just happens instantly. That's what I think.
Also, it becomes like a more selfish way of prayer, no? Because like not focused on other people and how you can help, because you're so anxious about your own problems, your own life, you know, you don't trust that God is gonna help you, so you feel like you always have to focus on yourself.
Okay, so anxiety makes you focus on yourself and kind of prevents you from looking at other people's issues because you can't look at other people's issues. You're too preoccupied. Yes?
I'm going to just throw a different point of view here. Is it possible that anxiety could actually, in some cases, bring you closer to God?
Give me an example.
For example, let's say you're anxious and you can't, like, I'll take a personal example. I'm anxious, like, I have feelings not going good in school, exams are strong, are rough, all that. So, spiritual life is, it steps up a little, and you pray more, you try to get closer to God so that you can feel more security, and that way your anxiety could actually get you a little, it could actually boost up your spirit life a little bit.
So you're saying when you're anxious about the circumstances around you, you tend to pray more so that God can help you in that situation?
And right now you actually, you use that as an opportunity to see God's hand work in your life, so you pray more and you push your spiritual life even further.
Actually, build different response to an external stressor than anxiety. Instead of responding by
So this would
worrying
be
about
right
it.
before anxiety. This is
It's like instead of responding by being dwelling on it and brooding on it and worrying about it and just having your thoughts go round and round in your head, you respond to it by saying, okay, God, there's this really difficult situation. I'm bringing it to you. It's like a healthy response. Makes you result in, right?
But yeah, I think I could still I could pray about something and still be very anxious about it.
It's true.
So you pray more. As you're still anxious, you pray more.
So let me ask you this, maybe I'll sidetrack a bit, but not sidetrack, it's still in the topic. Who can tell me about people from the Old or New Testament who underwent severe anxiety? Give us an example.
And how long, O Lord, will you forget us forever? This is the sign of the Psalms.
So David, so if you read the Psalms, many of the Psalms start off being like, where are you, Lord? Why have you forsaken me? Many a time have they, afflicted me. So many sorrows. David was this person that, because for so many years he was being followed by Saul, trying to kill him, always escaping. It's a very tense time to be in. Okay, who else besides
By
David?
the time you get to the end of the psalm, you could 5 minutes to be praising God again. The psalms always end on a positive note.
They do.
Yes, but if you, at least to the best of my recollection, when they end on a positive note, it's never I am now happy. It's
No,
not.
it's
It's
God.
I will praise
Yeah,
you. You
yes,
will deliver.
yes.
Yeah,
So he's still in that bad state.
but trusting it.
He just has hope that somewhere down the line it's going to get solved.
That's true.
But it's not like he feels better at the end of the song. And he's still feeling
Sarah?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say maybe the disciples when Jesus was arrested and they were under a lot of stress and anxiety and they hid in a house, and even when Jesus came they were in shock and they didn't believe that Jesus rose. So they were under a lot of anxiety and fear that how come the teacher left us, how come the Lord left us. So they were under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And then
So
after-
when at time, you're talking about post-resurrection, but when else were they actually anxious, Bardo, for a short period of time, and Jesus actually rebuked them for their
Yeah, in the
anxiety?
storm.
Huh?
on the sea.
On the sea. Yes. He said, "Oh, you of little faith, I'm with you. Why are you worried?"
Yeah.
What else? Old Testament. There's a few characters in the Old Testament that went through severe anxiety. And for when you think about the story, and one of them specifically, I love that story because it's like this, he just did something amazing, and then he got a threat letter, someone, and then he went to complete depression. He switched to the almost complete Elijah. What happened there?
He challenged all the priests of the gods. And then he had the challenge with the sacrifice and stuff, and then he was mocking their god and Betty about and again. And then after his sacrifice, and then after he destroyed all the priests and stuff, then Jezebel was oh, let's just kill this guy, and then he got scared.
He got so depressed that he went and hid, and he told God, "Take my life I'm ready to die, like she's gonna kill me. You just like performed the biggest. If you actually read that story, it's kind of hilarious, right? Well, not hilarious, but it's like, you know, do you guys know the story of the Baal, the priest of the Baal, and all that? So he challenged the priest of the Baal, and the priest of the Baal came and like many of them, I don't know how many hundred of them.
Just sing the story.
Huh?
Sing the story.
So Elijah, because people were starting to worship the Baal. The Baal was like the god of fertility of the Mesopotamian region, like Iraq with Hittite. So Baal eventually infiltrated into Judah, and people started worshiping the Baal and Marafshay. So Elijah said, if the Baal is God, worship him. If God is God, worship him. So what they did was basically this contest, almost like a contest, where they said, okay, let's figure out which God is true. Okay? So the Baal came with all their priests, and they said, we're going to make an offering, and Elijah makes an offering, and whichever one gets the fire and like takes the offering, we know that this is the true God. So Elijah said, okay, no problem. The Baal priests came, they got their offering, and they were praying and jumping around and doing marafshay, and Elijah was mocking them. He's like, what's up with your God? Maybe he's asleep, you know, maybe someone needs to wake him up. Did you guys make sure you prayed in the right time and nothing's happening? And they hit themselves and they hurt themselves and marafshay, and nothing happened. And Elijah came and said, okay, before I do anything, just bring water and just pour it on the sacrifice. Or like, pour water. So they poured water. It's like, I think they did it 7 times or something like that, 3 times. So they kept bringing water and pouring it on the sacrifice. And then he raised his hands up in the air, and then fire came and took it with the water and everything. But when that happened, everyone was shocked that obviously Elijah's God is the true God. And they basically killed the priests of the Baal. And Jezebel, which was the evil queen at the time, she basically told him, you killed my priests, I'm going to come and kill you. Just like you did. Like tomorrow, you're going to be dead like they are dead. And he freaks out, Elijah. And he goes and hides. He actually hides, and for 40 days, an angel had to come to him to wake him up, to give him food and drink, so he can live. Like he didn't want to even eat. He was depressed. Like this is like severe depression and anxiety. So this is all to say that even the greatest people and spiritually speaking, went through a lot of hard times. Who else? Anyone else? Job. Job is kind of the obvious one. Anyone else? Yeah, Job?
Well, actually, there's
Moses.
Sorry.
Yeah, when did Moses feel like كده? Well,
you got the wrong guy, like, go take my brother.
did you
split the Red Sea?
Yeah.
Did you have something else in mind? Yeah, for like something specific for
Well,
Moses?
when he ran to the desert then, like when he ran off.
When he fled out.
After
40 years in the desert.
Ah, 40 years in the desert. And not only that, when he got frustrated because he told God, like, you have to forgive these people, these are your people, you know, if you're not going to forgive them, you might as well erase my name from the book of life. Like, he got so kind of anxious about God leaving his people.
But isn't that good anxiety?
Yeah, this is holy anxiety. Well,
Holy anxiety.
holy stress.
I remember somebody said this to me or whatever, but they were saying sometimes when things are going too well, let's say in your life, like, it's not a good thing, you know what I mean? That it's like you need to have a little bit of that anxiety to be on guard because but in the sense that in there everything is going well, ربنا مش محتاجه, you know what I mean? Like in that mindset. So like shouldn't you برضه be a bit like anxious in that?
أيوة.
That
I don't know. Okay, so. Yeah, I heard that.
Just to make sure it's not everything that's going well in your life.
I forgot about everything else.
I think that everything going well in my life is like it means you're in a spiritual complacency. You're like spiritually not moving forward. Because the devil is not gonna just watch you progress in your spiritual life and do nothing about it. So you're gonna get actually attacked more the more you try to progress in your spiritual life.
But Zaddy, can't it be like a grace period from God? Like a,
It
And I-
usually
I- I
comes,
don't
there
know
are
back and
people,
forth.
it usually comes, yani, like if I was reading some of the, like, في بستان الرمان وكده, yani, there's a few stories where like, you know, God, بعد ما الراهب, like he struggles with the sin for like, I don't know how many years, and then it says, and then God lifted, you know, the
Yeah.
war against, and he was period of grace. It does, yeah, for sure, but
no, like oftentimes people at the beginning of their spiritual lives, you know, they go through like a honeymoon phase with God. Where
It's
like,
always
like everything just comes so natural and like, oh, I feel like praying, I feel like reading the Bible all the time and everything's like lovey-dovey. Until like, then the day comes where it's like, okay, that grace is kind of like retracted a bit and then you need to like struggle and work.
yes. And, I mean, yeah. I feel God always gives you the struggle not because He wants, not because God is sadist and He wants you to suffer for the sake of suffering and that's it, but because suffering is a way for you to kill, or you know how St. Paul said, the body and the spirit go against each other. If you're constantly trying to feed the body and take care of the body and all that stuff, you're quenching the spirit. If anything, when you're going through times of suffering and struggling, it is a time, it's an opportunity for you to raise your spiritual life and forget about your body, forget about the physical things, and worry about the spiritual things. طيب. Actually, one of the things, برضو, harms of long-term anxiety or stress is lack of service, because when you're too focused on your issues and your problems, you tend to feel it much harder to serve others, because you're too much occupied in your own. Okay. Solutions to anxiety. What do you guys think?
Fixate on some
Cure.
verses in the Bible.
Hmm?
Fixate on some verses in the Bible.
Give me a verse, Muslim. Do you know any verse on top?
One cubit.
Sufficient is.
Be anxious for nothing.
Yes.
But
Okay,
in
so do not be anxious about tomorrow. Sufficient is today's worries. Yes. Yusuf.
The simplest thing is to talk about it to someone else, because someone else can see it from a different perspective and help you with it. It could be anybody, it could be your confession father or anybody. But that's a way of like, you know, like giving your problem to someone else to see it from a different perspective and like, you know, trying to help you with it. That's the simplest solution that I can think of.
And you're absolutely right. I agree with you. You need to speak to someone. But I think, like you said, you know, there has to be a wisdom in who you speak with.
Yeah.
Some people make it worse.
For example, don't talk to Mark. Mark will just make you feel so bad.
It's on camera.
Like imagine you told him something and he hits you.